So I'm finally done with this dress. It took me 3 weeks and I developed 5 different medical ailments, but this is the process of it.
To start, I took my hip and my waist measurement and I tried to figure out what size I needed to make my skirt. So there was a lot of math involved. I had to divide these numbers by 2 for the front and back piece and any other pieces. So I took the waist measurement, I had to figure out the hip measurement and how long I wanted it. I had to figure out the sides and also figure out what this base of the trapezium is. That way I would know if I had enough fabric or not. I had to Google how to find the base of a trapezium because it's been a while since trigonometry class, and I'm just as confused here as I was back then. I did learn in trigonometry class that it was absolutely essential I showed my working. Eventually, I figured it out, and these are the pattern pieces I came up with. I did plan for an ankle-length dress, but I ended up not having enough of this floral fabric to do so. So I cut my pieces out of both the floral fabric and my lining fabric, and I pinned it where I needed to sew it. I also pinned my lining fabric, and then I put the 2 fabrics together and sewed them together and made sure that my skirt would not be see-through. I also added a slit to the front, and this is how the skirt turned out. After finishing the skirt, I decided to do this bodice for it. I haven't done anything like it, and I started with this bunched part. So to bunch fabric like this, I had to do shirring. So shirring was actually just taking elastic thread and sewing it into my fabric. So I take my elastic thread and wind it around the bobbin. So this bobbin basically holds the bottom thread of my sewing machine. With elastic, I have to wind it with my hand and not the machine. I then start shirring, and you can see here I only have 2 lines of shirring and the fabric is already bunching. Here I'm stretching it so you can see that it's a little stretchy as well, and then I continued with my shirring. I probably did 25 rows of shirring on each piece of fabric, and there were 3 pieces of fabric to work through. When I was done, this was what the fabric looked like. The next step was to make these boob cubs for the top. I cut out a piece of fabric that was much wider than the width of my boob, and I sewed 2 lines of loose stitching across the edge of it. Then I gathered my fabric along that thread and made it much shorter and bunched it all up until it could fit as the size of my single underboob. I'm not sure how else to explain it. Once I was finished, I tried to sew the pieces together with a sewing machine, but my needle kept breaking, so in the end, I had to hand sew the boob pieces to my shirred pieces. I didn't take a video of my finished top, but here's a photo of it and how it looks. Now that I had both my skirt and my bodice, it was time to sew it all together. Once they were attached, I had this weird apron that was open-backed. That was because the back was where I was going to put in a zipper. I also hand sewed the zipper in, just like I hand sewed everything else almost in this project, and this is how it turned out. I feel like this dress makes me feel like I'm a French peasant lady or Marie Antoinette cosplaying as a glamorous French peasant lady, and I'm dressed to frolic in a field in the French countryside. This is my most difficult project to date, and I feel like I experimented with a lot of different new techniques. It's not perfect, but I'm quite happy with how it turned out. Looking back, there were a few things that I would have done differently, such as saving the shirring for the very end, just so that I didn't have to hand sew so much. Creating these projects is the way I teach myself to sew, and I'm really glad I get to take you guys along for the journey.